Welcome back, saucers.
Welcome back.
We have such a fun episode for you today. You're going to feel like you're going to want to cash app us or Venmo us for money because
it's a therapy session for all of us.
Yeah, but just also like a really good conversation, no matter if you're a man, woman, whatever, but just really relatable themes of self-doubt. But also, you know, if you're struggling with or know someone who's struggling with depression, anxiety, or addiction issues, this conversation is really important and beautiful because we are having it with an old friend of mine, Alexa Cordry. She's amazing. She's a trauma-focused therapist now, and she specializes in women recovery and radical self-compassion and finding softness in your self-image. And it's such a beautiful thing to do. It's a beautiful thing to incorporate into your practice.
Mm-hmm.
And the way she describes how she does it is just incredible. So yeah, we're going to shout her out at the end, her socials, but we're going to be tagging her on all our social media.
Yes.
But without further ado, Alexa. All right. Yay, Alexa, you're here. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited. We are so excited to talk to you about your journey, your life, your story, your essence, your spirit, all of the above.
I love
your
that.
essence.
And you know, we've said this before, but I've known Alexa for a long time, so I'm so excited to like catch up and hear this like beautiful chapter in your life. But so let's go back.
Okay.
You are a very just hilarious and beautifully talented actor. So like I want to know like what drew you to acting first?
Sure.
And there'll probably be a bridge to like
There is such a bridge, which is so funny. I was an actor, and I was mostly towards the end a stand-up comedian. That was a lot of what I was doing. I moved to California. I was in Orange County, a little bit in LA.
Mm-hmm.
What brought me to that was, I don't know, I have a desperate need for attention. But also, you're an actress. You're like, okay.
Same.
I also am really good at navigating tension is probably the best way I could say it. And I think part of what crosses over into me as a therapist is like, I'm really good at knowing what people want and what they're looking for. I can read a room really easily and I can build and release tension. And I didn't realize until I started doing group therapy that it's essentially the same tenets as stand-up comedy. in a lot of interesting ways. There's a performance element and a tension releasing element. But yeah, I just love to be seen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can relate. Who can't? That's interesting. I feel like there should be some sort of, I don't know, program for stand-up comedians. It could be like, if this isn't working out for you, therapy.
Try it. Give it a shot.
Try it.
So when did you start noticing like you needing a shift? Essentially, and like go wherever you want to go, wherever you're comfortable. Yeah, whatever you're comfortable.
Yeah. So my acting history is storied, I would say, because, and this is just such an authentic part of my journey. I was struggling with my mental health and a substance use disorder from a really young age, probably around 14, 15 is when I first started seeking treatment.
Wow.
In like rehabilitation centers. I spent a lot of high school in and out of rehabs, actually. But acting, theater kept me alive during high school. And it was all really interwoven. So my SOS moment, if I can say
branding.
really occurred for me when I entered into recovery, which was at age 25. So I had about 10 years of acting, doing comedy, crisscrossing the country, but at the same time kind of outrunning myself, my addiction and my depression, trying to figure out where I fit.
That's like tricky because it's an industry that can heal you from things, but also throw you deeper into the pits of despair.
And when we're talking intention-based, like my intentions with my performance career were so aligned with my ego. For me personally,
No, yeah.
it was like the thing that like made me feel like I was good enough, like I was funny enough, like I was
Yeah.
caring enough. So I had to take a full, because I would get sober for a little bit and I would enter into comedy spaces and I would relapse. So it was like I had to kind of say goodbye to that life as I entered into recovery.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's crazy because stand up, I feel like even more than acting in general, stand up is like one of those worlds that just like,
2 drink minimums.
yeah, like it just feeds into addictions, like substance abuse, really beautifully. I feel
yeah,
like
yeah,
it just, yeah. It's like a nighttime, nightlife, and
Mhm. You're not going on until 2 a.m. You're waiting in line. The open mic is at the bar.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever met comedians. They are sad.
yes, yeah,
It's part of why they're so brilliant at what they do, because they see this really beautiful nuance in very normal everyday activities. But part of that is their own ability for empathy and being able to tap into pain.
Again, therapy.
it is interesting. Like, do you think that there's, because I know there's a good amount of, or I know a good amount of people who have transitioned from being actors into being therapists, and I think that it's interesting because it's like those people will recognize a gift of theirs, which may be like connecting with others, telling stories, empathy, which it's very easy to be like, oh, then I should probably be an actor, because those things go with, all of that goes with acting. But then if it's not feeding you, that's a very different career that actually highlights the same gifts. That it's like, oh, I actually should have been applying it to this.
Legitimately. And I think that's where it was interesting. So when I entered into recovery, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was barely sober. My nervous system was like shot. I'd been using on and off for the last 10 years. I also have a concurrent depression diagnosis. So when I got sober, I was so depressed. It took a few years for the fog to lift, but as the fog started to lift and I looked more at my intentions and my motives, it was really towards helping people gain access to the force for change that negative emotions can be, um, which is kind of my second SOS moment. Can I have two?
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
can have a billion.
I have
Okay.
2,000.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I have two. I made an outline. I'm very prepared.
Yes, I love this.
The second is that when I finally stabilized, it was just like, and I want to say this took a year, and this took 2 years. I'll have 6 years sober in September, and
Wow.
um, it like was a white light moment of my negative emotions are not going to kill me. And I know that sounds so simple. But for someone who chronically used substances, it was like the most remarkable thing that I could endure a level of discomfort or anxiety. And then the second part of that was kind of flipping it from like, Alexa, how could you use drugs, to Alexa, how could you not use drugs?
Right, empathy for yourself.
That was the piece that changed it all. That was like, I was in so much pain. And I was trying so hard to figure out how to cope in a way that made sense to my body and my brain. And it was not helping.
Yeah.
But it provided an outlook. So when I took that radical self-compassion lens into it, that's when everything changed for me. Like I went back to school.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was your support system, or what was your support system like during that? Was it were you very much maybe by yourself, or did you actually have the support you needed at the time?
I had such incredible support. And I do want to shout out that I had insurance benefits. And when you have insurance benefits, you have access to myriad treatment availabilities. If you do not have insurance, or if you have Medicaid, the ability for you to seek treatment is bar to none. So that's a huge systemic issue. I also found a foundation, which I'm no longer a part of a 12-step program, but I spent the first 5 years of my recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I had a huge amount of support through that. I'd been going to 12-step meetings since I'd been 16.
Wow.
So when I entered into a space ready to be sober, it was really weird because I got sober like near my hometown and everybody knew who I was. They've been seeing me since I
Oh
was a
gosh.
teenager. Yeah. So
Wow.
I had this crazy support system through that. I have a crazy supportive family who, funny enough, when I got sober, a year later, my dad got sober. And then a year after that, my brother got sober.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. So it had
But you,
this like crazy rippling effect on the
yeah,
family dynamic.
Wow.
Um,
You really
yeah.
you did that.
yeah.
Yeah. I'd be telling
That's
them that.
beautiful.
Y'all
Guys,
wouldn't have it.
You're a cycle breaker, and
hmm
that's
honestly, for real. I mean, that's really powerful. That's
Mhm.
yeah. But
really hard.
and that is, I feel like, I mean, not that that was your goal always to just fix everything around you. You know, you had to start with you. But how did you build the confidence to go from, having that moment where you went into recovery and you came out and you're telling yourself to just be better and do better, and love yourself. But how did you find the confidence to be a guide, to be a therapist and go to school for that? Because I feel like that's like even a whole other ballpark.
Yeah. It's so funny. Like it goes back to acting in a certain way, which is like
Mm,
I'm I want to connect with people. Like and for the most part my driving force was I want to help people with the experience that I have. Like have been in the recovery scene for so many years. And it was weird. I failed out. I mean, Alyssa, personally, I was kindly asked to leave Montclair State after I was labeled a medical risk, um,
wow.
because they kept finding me unconscious on
Yeah.
campus. Like,
Yeah.
um, so I had no faith that I could even complete school. But
Mm,
to be a guide, I don't know. I don't think that I ever even thought of myself that way. More that like I know this really well and I'm good at connecting
yeah.
with people. Um
Yeah. And you
and
want to help, right?
mhm.
Like,
Yeah, and I'm a loudmouth too. Like my parents will tell you, talk about breaking intergenerational trauma. Like I can't not say what I believe in. So
hmm
as soon as I was like sober and learning stuff about myself, I would just like not scream it, but I would just like tell my parents, like,
yeah.
do you see this? Do you see what this is? Look at this. And learning about myself and about trauma and trauma
Yeah.
informed care. It's like,
So were your parents like, because everyone has trauma to some degree, it's all relative, but then, it always comes from childhood and nobody gets out of childhood without it. And it's, you could be the
Me.
best parents in the world. And then, but I know a lot of times, like as parents, to hear your kid as an adult grapple with like trauma of their childhood, a lot of parents can't really handle it because it feels too personal or like an attack or like, well, we didn't, get defensive because it's like we didn't mean to fuck you up basically. But I don't know if your parents like
Yeah.
how did they handle it? And then also you said, your dad kind of took a cue out of your book. So did you feel like you were able to, as you were realizing these things about yourself, like you're saying, I don't know how real you were able to be in the moment. Like,
Mm.
guys, I remember, I have this problem because when I was 15, this happened. Like, were they able to really
mhm.
hear it and not get defensive?
Yeah, my family's incredible, man. I wouldn't be alive today because my mom basically dragged me to rehab. Like she realized really quickly, like,
Yeah.
something's not right here.
Mm.
So, yeah, me and my mom specifically have worked a lot on our intergenerational trauma. And
Wow.
I am definitely like the spearhead of that, but um when I started getting help, she started getting help and then we got to have these really interesting conversations about like, you had two kids by the time you were 25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like she's like, "Yeah, I was a child who was just projecting my
Right.
stuff onto you guys and the way that that affects you." And so we're actually currently all of us, my mom, my dad, my brother, and me in family therapy right now.
I love
Wow.
that.
Did you
'Cause
did you recommend that, or is you go ahead?
we you're fine. No, I think we had a particularly tough Christmas this year because we're all still kind of working through stuff as a family, and we all were like, we renamed our family group chat Dysfunction Junction, and then we all joined therapy.
Wait,
as a unit.
after this Christmas you did, you mean?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
so it's recent.
Yeah, we
But
were just like,
You're like,
"It's
this seems
time."
right. Yeah.
That level of like group self-awareness though, like family self-awareness, I feel like is so rare because even if there's a parent and a child who's on board, the other parent or the siblings aren't, like that's really beautiful.
Yeah, and I think it's like a reflection of how I am the way that I am.
Yeah.
Because they are just like down to clown.
Yeah.
They're funny and they're awesome, and
But like their love and respect for you, if they didn't have that, they wouldn't value what you're doing and what you have to say, and they wouldn't feel like maybe we should do it. It's like they really respect you.
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I've never thought of it that way. That's so funny. I think they do.
I would think,
It's
I mean,
very sweet.
to implement it
Yeah.
as like a whole individually, for them individually to implement it, but then as a family, it's like, there are things that your parents like want to support you in. They might, of course, they love you, but if they don't really respect what you're doing, they're just going to be like, okay, and like let it go. And like, that's her thing or whatever,
Yeah.
but to actually absorb it and implement it within the family that's to me,
Yeah.
that's like massive respect for you.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
The hearing from your mom, I had the reflection point of like, nobody gets this experience, because I got to hear from my mom like, hey, my trauma affected you when you were growing up.
Nobody gets that.
Nobody
I just got
hears
chills.
that.
What the fuck?
No, I know it's weird, but like nobody gets to hear that from their mother. Like
The unicorn of like mother-daughter phrases.
the immense healing that comes with that type of statement, and us being able to work on our relationship. Because mind you, also, I was like life-threateningly addicted to drugs for 10 years of my life. So like I was no peach either. There was a lot to be unpacked in terms of like what we went through as a family when I was addicted.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's cool now.
Yeah.
I mean, I have so much admiration for that. I love that because it's just like, we're all human. It's so easy for everyone to take things personally. And I can only imagine you have a child, and then to realize that they're having to deal with some of your trauma is one thing, but to bring it up in a non defensive way, I guess, or just to open that conversation up with the generation below you is really powerful. And then you being in a place to hear it, like that's all. I bet this is like what true genius therapists are made of.
Yeah.
This is
the special sauce.
I want to say too, this is advanced level work. Because
Yeah, don't expect your mom
It's not day one.
tonight. Don't call them and be like,
don't call them.
I'm waiting for you to tell me about the trauma that you had and then inflicted on me. Waiting.
It is a result of 10 years of like intermittent. I've been in therapy since I've been 14. I'm now a therapist.
wow.
Like they're in therapy. But like when we're starting this work with addiction and mental health, like we first have to learn like what is even happening.
Yeah.
Then when we become aware, we can be curious. Then when we're curious, we can develop some skills. Then we can try and implement, probably fail, keep implementing.
Yeah.
And the list goes on until we get to this place of like integration. And that legit, I'll have 6 years sober, 10 years, but like, I think I just started being able to do that like a year ago.
Wow.
Like to be able to feel a sensation in my body and go like, I know what this is. I know how to cope with this. This isn't a reflection, like ninja level.
Yeah, it is. It's like sensei. Like, how are you?
No. You
Go ahead. No.
No, please.
This is kind of like a pivot question. So if you wanted to piggyback,
I'll remember mine because I don't really know. Could pivot.
I wonder, because my friends who have addiction issues or had, or I mean, still struggle. I've heard differing opinions on this, and I wonder your opinion. This could be solely based on your experience or what you've learned in training. Like, is it true that in order for most people to, seek help when you're struggling with addiction issues, do you find that a hard bottom, is where you need to be in order to seek help? Or do you find it like, no, it can happen. It could be a soft bottom, or do you really have to just
Rock
go through the
bottom.
worst hard rock bottom, stuff.
The bottom is when you stop digging.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt to hit a rock bottom. But it truly is. I've seen people get sober in all circumstances. If we even look at my differences, and there were times where I entered into recovery when I was homeless, and then the time when I got sober and it stuck. I had a car, I had a job, I was living with my parents. Like I wasn't destitute. Spiritually, I was bottomed out. So
yeah, so maybe that's what it is, huh?
maybe I've also seen people walk in to meetings or treatment and say like, when I drink too much and it's affecting my life, you know? And so everybody has the capacity for their bottoms to look different.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, because you're talking about, the integration is like high level stuff and dealing with that with your mom is high level and, where it has to start. And you also mentioned like, you and your family having to work through years of what your personal addiction did to your family. So that made me think of, I mean, that's so much like guilt and shame to work through and self-forgiveness. And I have had, not for substance abuse, but for like plenty of reasons, a lot of like dealing with guilt and shame for things that I've done that is like self-forgiveness is like the hardest thing. And I wonder if you as a therapist, what your distinction is between guilt and shame, and then how you really like, how do you even begin? That's such a vague question, but it's the hardest part.
That is my dream question, Molly. You really just spoke to me. I'm also a Brene Brown. She's a social worker. I'm a social worker. I pretend that she's my mentor, but she doesn't know who I am.
She is your mentor.
My therapist loves Brene Brown too. It's a sign of a good therapist. Yeah,
it absolutely is. She talks a lot on shame and the corrosive nature of it. The difference, the easiest way I could suss out the difference between guilt and shame is guilt says, I am bad. I have done a bad thing that is out of alignment with my true self. Guilt is a helpful thing. It is a human thing that we need evolutionary wise to help us get back to who we really are.
Course correct. Yeah.
The word sin is actually an old archery term that means to miss the mark. So guilt is so helpful. We need that.
Yeah.
Shame is I am bad. So guilt says I have done a bad thing. Shame says I am bad. I am fundamentally flawed. I'm a bad person. Right.
That's the one that sticks.
Yeah.
And you're probably not feeling guilt. You're probably feeling shame. Guilt sucks, but it's not attached to our fibers.
Like our core character.
So in terms of unpacking shame, I talk a lot about the use of radical self-compassion. I have this book. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. It's propping my laptop up, but I want to show it to you.
Yes, I want to see.
Do you guys know who Sonia Renee Taylor is?
No.
She's amazing. Can you see this amazing cover?
Is that her? Is that her?
The body is not.
The book is called "The Body Is Not an Apology: The Power of Radical Self-Love."
Adding this to my Amazon cart, literally right now.
She's incredible. She's does a lot of activist work. She's on Instagram, and I found her a few years ago. But she wrote this amazing book on the power of radical self-love and like how it's more than self-acceptance. It's more than self-forgiveness. It is a fundamental truth that the book is called "The Body Is Not an Apology," but like there is no apology in your actions. And not in a no accountability way, but her framework also talks about the power of radical self-love to heal like systemic issues and the way we deal with the world around us. I'm not doing it justice. I'm so sorry.
No,
Sonia. I'm
I'm
sure she's not listening, but if she is,
sorry, Sonia. Rude.
Please.
We get a lot of listeners.
She's our number one fan. We don't know her.
I also, just for the record, it is in my Amazon cart now.
Beautiful.
Right now, yes.
But just to talk about radical self-compassion, it is the solve that will break down your shame. So Give me an example of, doesn't have to be anything heavy, but give me an example of something you've done that you feel like guilt or shame over.
What? And like, I'll tell you what mine was, because everyone close to me in my life knows that I cheated on someone like years and years ago, and it took me, oh my God, like I think I'm still doing like the remnants of it, where it's just like,
Yeah.
and someone I loved, like someone I really care about. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that was a thing where it did turn from like what you just said, like guilt being like I did something bad. Of course that was there, but the I am bad was like, I
Mm.
mean, it sent me into like a whole multiple years, like figuring out my spirituality, figuring out am I even a good person? What does it mean to be a good person? I'm not who I thought I was. Like, oh my God.
First off, thank you for sharing that, because that's incredibly vulnerable and I appreciate it. If we take that instance and the shame that you've attached to it, like what would it look like for you to be compassionate with yourself in that space?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it was a good, oh my gosh, like 5 years before I really, and that whole time I was going like trying, like searching and trying, but I just let like trying to fix everything, and then like anxiety took over in a lot of ways. And then, but really what started, I journal a lot. I've always kept a journal, and what really like started helping me was writing down, like, like, how do like writing down things about myself that I didn't necessarily believe at the time, but just keep writing them down until I believe it. Like I am a good person, simple statements, but then
Mm,
also
mm,
having empathy for that version of myself and being like, okay, I can know that what I did wasn't right, and I'll never back it up like it was a wrong decision, but I understand why that version of me did this at this age and what was happening in my, like understanding why it happened without
yeah.
giving an excuse for it is a really hard distinction. Because for years I was like, if I have understanding for doing that, then I'm making an excuse for myself.
No. And again, thank you so much, because you kind of answered your own question. Like you were going through a process of extending this compassion. And I'm a firm believer that radical self compassion, which means like you are inherently worthy, you are not flawed, you have
Hmm.
worth and value. Like any action you take is not a reflection of you being a flawed human being. I truly believe that.
Yeah.
But it needs to be coupled really gently. Do you see my group therapist coming out right now with all my
Yes.
hand movements? It needs to be coupled with accountability. So
Hmm.
we need to have that two-pronged approach of like, I didn't, what I did wasn't cool.
Right.
And I don't want to do that anymore. And I am a good person.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it doesn't fix everything right away.
Yeah. It doesn't.
It still feels like, can I curse?
Yes.
It still feels like shit. It feels like so
Yeah.
much shit, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. That's a really good. I brought that up because when you were talking about how far you've gotten now with your family, I'm like, to even get there with them, you would have to not be beating yourself up constantly for the
Yep.
years of
Yeah.
when you were at your lowest. Like that alone takes so much time.
Same for your other family, they could feel guilt over not,
Mhm.
being there or whatever. Just you in general not being where you needed to be or wherever you were at. Like I can imagine that kind of guilt or shame coming into play, and to have the
Yeah.
bravery and courage and the words to express like, I'm ready to have that accountability and I'm
Mhm.
ready to heal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So admirable.
You work like specifically with women's recovery and self-love, like speaking of compassion and radical self-love, you say, right?
Radical self-compassion.
Compassion. But I love that. Is there a reason why you like to work with women specifically?
I love
Because
women.
we're the most fucked up.
Yeah.
We're the most fucked up, true.
Maybe it's because I am a woman myself. I also really love to work with the trans and queer community. That's probably my ideal client, with trans women specifically. But I don't know. That's a really good question, because it really is targeted at that.
Mhm.
I currently work full time at a substance use treatment center. So that's my full time job. So I am working with a diverse number of individuals, but I find that women are the last people to give themselves compassion.
That is true.
Amen.
Wow. Wow.
Like straight up. Like, if I could name the amount of women I've worked with where the core belief is I'm not good enough. All the work that we come back to, it could be hidden in a bunch of other beliefs, but all the work we come back to is I'm not good enough. I'm not doing enough.
Putting everyone else before you.
Yeah. Like, and never centering themselves in the narrative. And then you add the extra component of the substance use. Fun fact, there will always be like a 70-30 ratio of men versus women in substance use recovery. And so 70% men, 30% women. And you'll see this reflected in 12-step meetings and in treatment centers. A big part of that, I'm so sorry for coughing.
No, you're fine.
How dare you?
A big part of that is the stigma that faces women when they go to seek help. So if they need childcare or if they're primary child giver, caretakers, accessibility for women to remain out longer.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of stigma that plays against
They're
women.
already getting paid less, so they can't miss as much work.
Can't miss as much work. So when I get a woman in my chair who's like beaten down, all I want to do is just tell her to be gentle on herself.
Yeah.
I feel like that's my whole frame of reference. Like at the end of every session I have with a client, I say, gentle, gentle.
I love that. I do love that because it's so easy everyone is their own toughest critic, I know, but.
Oh my God.
Oh
this
my
is literally
gosh.
my last session on Wednesday was all going into my critic. And it was brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, to be continued, obviously, like it wasn't, but it's one of those things that, you don't really realize you have either. You think, or at
you're
least
used to it in your own head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether you're an artist or not, but even as an actor, you think I'm fucking tough. I can handle it. You can tell me I'm ugly. I don't give a fuck. I'm going to book this room. I don't care. And then all of a sudden someone says like, oh, you didn't bring the right headshot or something like that. And you're like, oh, I'm a fucking piece of shit. I'm not worthy of a space. Like, why am I even here?
Yeah.
Like, it's just so bizarre how it comes out. When it comes out, like, and for me, I'm like, oh, I had no idea. I truly didn't. I truly thought I was stronger than this. But oh yeah, no, go ahead.
So here's the cool thing. Like, what if you didn't have to be stronger than that? Like, you don't have to be.
Why do we think we have to be like
capitalism?
Capitalism,
patriarchy.
But like. I want you, my wish for you and all women is to celebrate their softness. Like, there was this whole thing going around about like emailing like a man.
Yes, I saw that.
Right?
What? Wait, no.
We saw that where it was like, I email, this is me like responding as a man.
Yeah.
Yes, which I totally get.
Like
I
no
work with a lot of men.
exclamations,
Yes.
like don't like, sorry to
Apologize.
bother. Yeah.
It was like the woman being really proud of herself for being like, I'm going to email like a Chad. It was very funny. Don't get me wrong.
It was funny.
I don't know what this woman is doing or what she's not doing. But I thought the message of that was really interesting because it's like, what if we were just soft and we embraced our softness and we made people adapt to that? Like, what if I use 8 exclamation points and like that makes me feel really happy and I don't need to internalize your misogyny and like.
Oh, exactly. Because that's also what it is. It's like, but there is a line because we are taught to over apologize and over. So
There's
it's
a
like,
line.
where's that line? We had a guest, Caitlin Barclay.
Yeah.
We talked about this, but she's like,
She lives works in the corporate world. Yeah.
Yeah, she founded her own startup. It's like in Forbes. She's doing really well. And she was talking about the emailing. And she said when she was starting out and pitching to different people, you know, she had got a lot of her advisors, male advisors being like, you know, you should talk a little bit more like this, basically trying to be like, don't be so, because she's pretty like, I don't know, she's a human being, but she's a woman in the boardroom. And so it was like, be a little less exuberant or, you know, and
they
she
would vibe very well.
I think so. Yeah. And she's like, you know, but then I just decided, I was like, you know what? Whose company is this? It's mine. Who can represent it the best? It's me. And this is who I am. And there's a line like you said, that line of being like, okay, am I doing this because I'm programmed to be, oh, haha, sorry.
Yes.
Or is this just my personality? And she has got a lot of it really is her personality to be that way. And she said she makes it a point now in her emails and in her pitches to just like, no, this is how I talk. This is my company. But it's like a conscious, we have to deprogram so much.
Oh, and I love what you said about the line too, because it's like that line is intuition based, which is like my third point of this overarching thing, which is like when you can when you can utilize radical self-compassion, identify your negative feelings as not something that's there to harm you, but something that was programmed a long time ago to try to keep you safe.
Right.
And accountability into this nice little stew, what you're going to find is you're going to be able to access your intuition really quickly. Like, ooh, this feels bad, or ooh, this feels good, or this feels authentic, or oh, this is coming from a place of insecurity. Like, you get to use that intuition to kind of like say, I like using exclamation points. So, you know,
like this feels like me, or it doesn't feel like me, because there are times where I'll write stuff and I'll make it sound a little too nice and it doesn't feel like me. And then I notice that and I'm like, no, that's not it. Or even, you know, how women are, I was talking the other day with someone about how when girlfriends see each other, it's like we're all programmed. Our voices go up like an octave and we're like, like it's so fucking annoying. And I've done it so many times too. And like we probably all did it when we got on Zoom. And it's like that is programmed in completely because my vocal range is like down here. And why when I see a girlfriend and we all do it,
joy.
But it doesn't but for me and my intuition, I'm like, this isn't me. My joy isn't like squealy. Like it doesn't feel like me. Some women it is them actually. So I understand that, but it's like become the norm. And I hear myself do it sometimes and I'm like, this isn't who I am. And so I guess when you know your intuition, it's like, don't do it.
Yeah. And then like actively defying your programming, which, you know, as a woman, we have a ton of, but even just as our individual trauma and core beliefs, like feels really weird when you first start doing it. And that's something I try to drive into my clients as well, which is like, when we start this work, it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Right.
You're going to feel real weird putting this stuff into place. Like everything in your brain is going to be screaming, I am not safe when we try to break patterns. And to be able to hold that and be like, thank you, brain. I know you're just trying to keep me safe right now, but it's not helping, but thank you.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of practice too.
Yeah. This might be a tiny pivot question, but I just wonder with people who suffer from addiction issues, whether they're high functioning or not, like what are some signs of those issues if you don't recognize them in your friends or your family? You know, if you have a loved one that could be struggling, but you don't necessarily know those signs if they're high functioning.
Yeah. Great question. Just to quickly go over like, okay, so this is like DSM criteria for different substance use disorders that hits different ranges of mild, moderate, or severe. But if you notice your loved one is unable to attend to their regular activities as they normally would, so calling out of work a lot, staying home a lot, isolating, you'll see that a lot of these criteria blend into mental health diagnoses really quickly too, because these could be signs of depression or PTSD. Spending large amounts of money that's unaccounted for is a big one. This is not DSM criteria, but like you'll see emotional dysregulation over small things, easy irritability, or big arguments over things that were like a very small issue, maybe
like
looking for an excuse to leave. Gaslighting is just like, like because you're trying to call someone out on behavior they don't want to end, that'll come up a lot.
Right.
It's interesting, like in women too, like women, like you said, are the last ones to feel compassion for themselves, but also, and then in turn, like not necessarily go into recovery. So I wonder if women are maybe even more adept to hiding.
Yeah, I would say 100%. Like,
Yeah.
I think women are like, I don't know, women are sneakier too because we're more in general. These are such, I hate making statements like this, but I feel like women are in general a lot more emotionally self-aware or in tune with themselves. And because of that, it's like we have to be expert because we have to hide it from ourselves because we know it. It's like we have to hide it
Yeah.
from our.
And I'll speak on an experience of like, me and my husband have been in recovery for a number of years. And when someone close to us was going through an addiction, I was very close to this person and I had been sober for some time. Can you guys hear my dog?
No.
I heard a little bit of like a woo.
I'm
So
hoping he
cute.
calms down. I had been very close to this person, and as the person who's loving someone who's addicted, you are going to believe everything before you believe they're addicted to a substance.
Yeah.
So when they're telling you that their mental health is slipping, or their boss is an asshole, or there's an excuse for this, like,
Yeah.
I desperately wanted to believe that. And my husband was like, he's getting high. And I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, I'm a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor, a licensed social worker with 6 years in recovery. And I was like, they could not be getting high. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, when it's loved ones.
So he was like, they're getting high. And they said to me after the fact, once they went to rehab and got out, he was like, Alexa, I didn't even know I was getting high. Like,
Whoa.
I had brought myself to this place of denial where like my doctor called me and told me I tested positive for fentanyl, and I was like, well, it's it's still under control, like it's not actually an addiction. Like, really thought that he was. So
Wow.
the game you do to yourself when you're in addiction, like,
Wow.
they're so good at lying because they're lying to themselves as well.
Exactly.
Wow, that's wild.
That is crazy.
I mean, to think about, that you don't even know you're getting high. Is it more like, and if I sound kind of like naive or dumb on the thing, is it just, that like he's aware that he does it maybe once, but or is it just he's at a continuous high that he's forgetting?
It is that he thought that it was under control.
So he was like aware,
and because he was maintaining his withdrawal essentially and not getting really physical effects of high anymore. Meanwhile, he's accidentally buying like fentanyl press pills, and could have easily overdosed. But like he's saying like, this is under control. I'm taking this at this time and this time, and he was convinced.
He thinks he's maintaining like homeostasis to a degree, but he's actually high. Yeah.
In your training, or even as you work as a therapist and with your clients, have you ever felt like out of depth, where you're just like, am I able to help this person, help these people in this way? And how do you overcome those overwhelming feelings?
Yes, that sounds like a classic case of imposter syndrome.
Yes, it does.
Which I imagine you ladies experience as well in the field that you're in. I think an asset of mine is I'm really quick to say I'm out of my depth. There's a thing that we have to do as licensed clinicians, which is we have to seek supervision, which means we have to do an hour a week with someone who's higher than us to provide us like support and supervision on the practice we're doing. So I'm not shy of saying like, I'm out of my depth and I don't know what to do. Most of the time I'm really transparent with clients. So if I have a client who comes in and says, I'm struggling with this and it feels out of my depth, I'll say like, this is new for me too. Like, let's talk about the feelings that are around it. And let's determine if I'm the right fit in this circumstance.
I love that.
Yeah. But like as a therapist, the imposter syndrome is so real.
Yeah, I bet it's a very weird thing because it's like,
because you're getting a lot of trauma, you know what I mean? That you're like, that you're prepared for, but not really,
Yeah. I used to have this thought when I was a baby therapist, where clients would sit in my chair and my automatic thought would be like, why? I can't believe they're telling me this.
Yeah.
Like, legitimately, because I was just like, you're just a
my
human in a
God.
chair listening to
Right,
someone.
right.
I come from a very trauma focused lens, so I'm pretty comfortable with doing the trauma work, but
Yeah.
it's an interesting, when you're a
Yeah.
baby therapist, you're just like, am I doing therapy? Am I just
Yeah.
listening? Or
Like, am I scamming this person?
yeah,
Or-
exactly. Exactly.
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
I know.
What have you learned the most since becoming a therapist? This could be a huge loaded question, but like just self-discoveries in your practice.
I have learned that I am a badass.
Yes.
I think that was like, that's the most succinct way to say that. Like, I keep moving into fearful spaces and I hold like tremendous weight for my clients in the therapy room. And it's such an honor and such a privilege. And I'm such a badass that I'm able to do that.
I love that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I do, because it's so much like to not let it absorb and weigh you down and take over you is a real power,
Yeah.
strength.
Yeah, which brings me to the other point, which is like I've learned how to take care of myself. I have a therapist that I see regularly. I now see a family therapist as well.
hmm
Um, but there's a thing called like countertransference or parallel process or vicarious trauma, where therapists can have secondary effects of PTSD from working with a lot of clients
Yeah.
with PTSD.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I've learned so much about my capacity and need to ask for help, my self-care routines.
Mm.
It's 11 o'clock in Jersey right now, and it's way past my bedtime. And like, but part of my self-care routine is like, I go to bed at 9:30. Like,
hmm
I have to take care of myself. I can't pour from an empty cup. And
Right.
the social, at least where I work, everyone's like, I could walk in that day and be like, today's not the day. And they'd be like, go
Yeah.
home. Like,
That's okay. That's good.
Yeah.
I've always wondered that, because that's such an emotionally taxing job of all jobs. And so there's like some days you just can't. Like, you can't.
you can't.
I love
You
that
can't.
and you feel like you could say that and just
Yeah.
have it respected.
Yeah.
Um
That's amazing.
Was
and
that
then
a good answer? That was such a great question.
Yeah.
yeah, that was a really good answer.
I mean,
Do
it's
you
a
see
loaded
the,
question.
oh my God, the like natural imposter syndrome that came up right there?
Yes. Yes, but I do
happens.
think like you know how it is with friends when friends are each other's therapists, but not in a true sense because they're not impartial, but also like, do you find when you're talking to clients sometimes you're helping them through something that it's actually healing you to
Yes.
heal them?
Yeah, absolutely. I would be
Yeah.
lying if I said it wasn't. It's just, I think any therapist would tell you that. Like, when you are working with clients on specific issues, um, the things you're saying to them are like, you're like, oh, damn,
I needed to hear that.
I needed to hear that. Like,
Yeah.
and I need to practice what I preach in a certain sense. I think specifically for me, like learning and working so much with trauma specific clients, like broke open a lot of doors for how I conceptualize even my own substance use past,
Yeah.
my depression. I'm in recovery too. Like,
Mhm.
so when I'm learning and helping clients through stuff, I'm like, I conceptualize myself differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing. I feel like this is like a really good ad for people because, well, to be a therapist, because it's like you can give your friend advice, right? You can be like, no, you can do this. You got this. You know what I mean? And feel good about it. But there's no way in hell you're going to actually take that advice for yourself.
Yeah.
But you, as your therapist in your seat, you're like learning the tools to actually, as you're saying the words to your client, to
Mhm.
actually feel that yourself and take it in and process it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
That's a
said to a
superpower.
client one time, this doesn't feel good is a good enough reason to walk away. That's like you just having the thought, this
Wow.
doesn't feel good. And I was like,
You're like, who am I?
oh my God, that's so
Channeling.
great. Like,
Is.
I hadn't even really tapped into yet that, like, when my intuition sends me warning signs, like, that's enough. I don't need to offer explanation. I can just
Right.
walk away. And intuitively kind of coming to that with my client and then being
Yeah.
like, how cool.
I know. I
Yeah.
really love that though, especially for women, like you said, because we are like have to explain everything, have to make sure everyone else is okay, have to make sure we don't come across. It's like, no, this doesn't feel good. I don't want to. Is that the sentence can end there.
It sure can. Yeah.
Yeah. I love
You
that. I'm like, I feel like I just had a whole therapy session.
I know.
I feel like I really zeroed in on you, Molly. I was like, tell me.
Like, this is how you fix your life.
Before we let you go, I wonder, like, what do you wish society or just like other people understood about people suffering with addictions and depressions? You know, like what do you think where people get wrong about people who suffer? And like this is the part 2 is like, do you notice like policies that kind of hinder the progress and like support of people with addictions? And your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we've seen a lot of awareness bipartisanly for opioid awareness. It's quite literally a thing that both Democrats and Republicans can get behind. It's not controversial to not like opiates. It is also, let me think about this. The first part of the question was, let me answer the first part first.
Yeah.
What was that again?
What you wish like society would understand about people suffering with addictions.
Right. I wish that people would know that addiction isn't a choice. It comes from typically is motivated by an immense amount of pain. And I think a lot of people are lucky in the sense that, not lucky, but a lot of people have at least one person they know who's been affected by addiction or mental health. And the stigma persists on. So I think one of the things policy-wise that needs to change is that like everybody wants to help people with addiction, but nobody wants to help them in their own backyard.
Yes.
So, you know, when it comes to having accessible treatment options for people that don't have private insurance, which I work in the state of New Jersey, it is bar none. Like if you don't have insurance, like you may not get a bed. And they may tell you, you know, can you wait for 7 days before you enter treatment? And like that, like when the person's ready to go, they're ready to go and they can change their mind really quickly. So having more accessible treatment options that are funded publicly is very necessary, and not just 30-day residentials, like accessible sober living housing in all communities with people having an understanding that like if we want to solve this as a community and as a country, we have to be willing to look it in the face. Which means like the sober house might be next to your house.
Right. Yeah. So people just need to walk the talk.
Yeah. Policy wise, I don't want to speak out of turn. You know, I know a lot that's been done in New Jersey that was pretty ineffective. So I'm hoping for a more harm reduction based lens around treatment, and hoping that the urgency around the opioid crisis remains as urgent as it has been.
Like more preventative than...
Yeah, and just meeting people where they're at. Like, I totally believe in a harm reduction model. I believe in needle exchanges. I believe housing is a human right. And like we have like, to...
No, I was going to say like Tucker Carlson was just out there like being like, why the hell are Biden giving needles to... It's like, now they want the... It's like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah, and also like, who cares?
Right.
Like, who cares? Right. I've heard so much like, oh, I would give them $20 if I didn't know they were going to spend it on drugs. Like, what do you care? Like, I'm sorry, truthfully. And we can't treat the things that underlie addiction if we don't solve the housing crisis, if we don't solve community crisis, poverty. Like, it's all intertwined because addiction is coming from a deep place of trauma, in my personal opinion. So
nothing stands on its own. You don't just like solve the patriarchy without solving racism, without solving like
it's intersectional.
It's everything.
Wow.
thank you so much for coming on.
You are an angel.
Yeah, I feel like we need to pay you.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Take all my money.
Yeah, well, like fucking cash app you after this.
No, don't. It has been such a delight to talk to you guys. Like, thank you so much for asking me. And you made me stay up past my bedtime, so you should be
I'm so sorry.
very honored.
I feel bad.
Really
I feel so bad.
Don't you feel bad? You own that space, girl.
You own that. Yes, throwing you off your game.
I love you.
I love you too.
But thank you so much. I loved having you on. Love meeting you. Want to talk to you again.
Yeah, 100%. Got to have you back on.
Awesome. Anytime.
Wow, I really feel like I need to pay her for that.
I know.
Got
and we
a lot out of that.
we like continued our conversation after, and it's like I mean, it was not safe for work conversations, but it was just like we could talk to her for so long. Like we got to have her back on because she's just
for sure.
She's good time. She's so smart
and so candid and just like really makes you feel. I mean, as a therapist should, but I don't know how. I mean, she just makes you feel completely safe to just talk about whatever because there's no judgment coming from how she responds.
Yeah,
at all.
So if you're in Jersey, please, or in her network too, I guess that would be, the convenient thing. Please hire her because she's incredible. But you can find her on Instagram at Your Sad Therapist, Very
I love
easy.
that she got that handle.
I know, so good. And she's also an education director for My Help Connect. And she writes stuff for them and they help people too with talking about mental health issues.
Yeah.
And she's fucking incredible.
Yes. And the charity nonprofit for this one is Faces and Voices of Recovery. They're dedicated to organizing and mobilizing the over 23 million Americans in recovery from addiction to alcohol and other drugs, our families, friends, and allies our families, friends, and allies in the recovery community organizations and networks to promote the right and resources to recover through advocacy, education, and demonstrating the power and proof of long-term recovery. They work hard to advocate for public policies and funding that support addiction recovery for all. So to learn more and donate, please visit facesandvoicesofrecovery.org.
Yep. And then you can follow us on IG and Twitter at the SOS Pod. And you can find us on YouTube, obviously, SOS with Fine Alyssa. And then we're wherever you find your podcasts, Google, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Rate and review us. It helps us reach all the people everywhere. And we have a Patreon, guys.
Yeah. So not going to want to miss that this year.
Yeah. We have some new bonus footage. We're getting more in the works, new content, everything. Like you're going to get it.
And please write, like Alyssa said, reviews, also engaging on our Instagram page. If there's an episode, this episode, for example, might have really touched some of you or hit some of you in a certain way, share it with family, friends, anyone that you think would be interested. And it helps us grow our audience and our listeners. We do focus on mental health a lot. So help us grow. And I'm Molly Cottrell.
I'm Alyssa Rosano.
Here's to turning meltdowns
into magic.